Hey everybody, welcome back to the I Play 2 podcast. I'm your host, Rob Adler. This week, former college baseball player Jared Van Der Beek joins the show. Jared was a three-sport athlete in high school, competing in baseball, football, and was an all-state member in diving. In college, he was a pitcher at the University of Vermont, mostly coming out of the bullpen in relief. And now he's with Pathway to Healing, which blends Eastern and Western healing philosophies to help people deal with pain. His brother, James Van Der Beek, played the role of Dawson Leary in Dawson's Creek, Mox Moxon in Varsity Blues, and has appeared in shows such as Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23 and CSI Cyber. Jared, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rob. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for doing this. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Beautiful day out there today and happy to jump on here.
Thank you so much. How are things in the Bay Area for you?
They're going pretty well, but I got some changes. I just moved my office from one location to another, so I've been pretty busy, but I'm excited for the new adventure.
Any hiccups with the office move?
Oh, of course. Do moves ever go as smoothly as you would plan?
That's a good point. Nothing ever goes as smoothly as planned when it comes to moving.
Yeah, exactly. But things moved a little slower than I had anticipated, but I was fortunate, had a lot of people helping me out, and we'll be ready to go in the new year.
So I'm curious, how did you make it out to the West Coast from the East Coast?
Acupuncture school brought me out here. I had done physical therapy on the East Coast in college, and then after doing it for 5 years, doing a lot of manual therapy work, I started to be introduced to different modalities, and I looked into acupuncture, and I was like, wow, that sounds really good. And California had the most strict regulations as far as licensure goes. If you got licensed in another state, but didn't have California-approved classes, you couldn't work in California as an acupuncturist. So I figured if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. So I moved out here, and that was 14 years ago. So I haven't left yet.
What intrigued you about acupuncture in terms of, I guess, a way to reduce pain and accelerate healing?
I think one of the biggest things is just a completely different system of the body that it looks at. It looks at meridian lines or energy flows in the body. And when there is a congestion of this energy flow, it creates pain. Just moving that energy through that area so that it decreases your pain. It also looks at just harmonizing your body, what areas or organs in the body are working too hard, which ones are not working strong enough. And so it's all about bringing that body back into a harmony or flux so that you're in a better balance physically, emotionally, mentally.
Do you ever, in your acupuncture business, ever deal with somebody with like a genetic condition to try to help them out as opposed to somebody who might have pain, let's say, from a sports or acting injury?
Genetically, I have worked with some people. I mean, not necessarily a specialty of mine, but genetics, you look at epigenetics and the study of that recently, there's a lot more on that. And when you get your body in balance, things just start to work better. So again, if you have a misalignment, you're going to have maybe low back pain that goes to knee pain and foot pain. When you get the right structure, now everything starts to fall in line. Same thing with epigenetics. If there is a genetic predisposition, the less healthy you are, the more apt that that predisposition is going to show up. So depending on what genetic thing you're looking at, there are ways you can affect the body to really get the most optimal function and health of the body.
One of the things when I was reading about your pathway to healing of mixing, I guess, Eastern and Western medicines, I know it's a patient by patient situation, but how hard is it to figure out which form of medicine to use more of for a particular patient?
It's actually not too hard because we're all a combination of all of these. I look at the physical part of the body with physical therapy, Western medicine mindset. And then I'll also look at, okay, how are the energy systems in the body? And where's the overlap between those two? And then I'll also, while talking to the person, figure out, okay, how are they doing emotionally? How are they doing stress-wise? Are there certain mental beliefs or ways of thinking that they have that are maybe keeping them set in their pain? Is there a traumatic history that's keeping a pressure in the body, which is keeping the physical body from healing? So it's really looking at the body in this multidimensional way. And just by talking to the person, a lot of times they tell you what's going on and they let you know what is really that primary thing to work on. So one of the biggest things I see myself as listening, observing, and I help facilitate that person to get the healing. So I do the evaluation, Each treatment, I'll do needles to either help the physical part of the body we're working on, or also to help move forward in emotional blockages or storage of energy, because emotions are pressures that are stuck in the body. And so we can access them, we can move that energy through and not have it be creating more pain inside of us. So I really do kind of all of those at the same time. In the treatment, I'm talking with them, I'm with them with the needles, and then hands-on work. When you engage it just the right way, your body knows how to heal. So as you just engage it perfectly, your body's like, oh, great, thank you. Now I can do what I know I can do. And it starts to do the healing process.
Two follow-up on that. And the first one is, it sounds like you're almost part psychologist in your role, as well as administering the medical side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a personal history, through sports in high school and playing baseball in college, I had my fair share of hours in the training room. I would see one thing build on another, a hamstring tightness, and then sprained ankles and low back pain. And after graduating, I still had those pains. They never really went away. And then started getting work in the manual therapy aspect. But probably a couple months in, practitioner said, look, the next phase of your healing is your emotional state. And I kind of looked at him like, you're crazy. Like, what? I still have this physical pain. But as I started to work through childhood trauma and start to look at emotions that I'm holding on to, the pain in the body just started to decrease and decrease. And so I really feel it's really hard to have a significant injury without having some emotional aspect to it, right? It's like you can't do what you want to do. So you get really frustrated, you get irritated. And if you don't address those as you're going through the healing process, you kind of get stuck there. And so you are kind of part psychologist in a way. I mean, definitely not a licensed psychologist, but I've studied something called heart math, which is a way of really helping the person connect into their heart space. And so you're connecting your mind, your emotions, and your body. And when you do that, you create a state of coherence. And so everything is working in line. And then there's this more harmony and balance inside the body.
Well, since you stole my second follow-up, which was, did you have injuries after you were an athlete? So this follow-up is going to be, in terms of the heart math, could you kind of go a little bit more in depth with that?
The heart math, it's a very simple way of breathing. Breath work, I'm sure you've heard it from other people, is pretty amazing. And there's so many different uses of how you breathe. There are different techniques that you can use for different situations. And heart math breathing is very simple as far as you first bring your mental energy down to the area of the heart and chest. And so that just brings your mind and your heart kind of emotions to kind of work together instead of your mind saying one thing and your emotions saying another. That kind of creates a battle, which creates a tension, which creates more stress. So you bring the mind down to the heart so they're connected. Just by breathing a little slower and a little deeper than normal, you start to regulate your autonomic nervous system. So your fight or flight sympathetic mode with your rest, digest, repair state, which is your parasympathetic nervous system. So just by breathing mechanically a little slower, a little deeper, you're bringing a harmony or balance back into your body so that you're not stuck in this survival mode. You start to be able to relax a little bit. Blood goes up into your mental processing areas of your brain. So now you can think more clearly. So now you can solve those problems that are creating the stress inside of you. And it goes more depth in that, but it's basically bringing you back to connect into your body, to think more clearly, and you could actually start to increase your ability to tap into your own intuition to find solutions to problems.
In terms of the Western medicine, because they're finding connections between the mind and digestion and things that cause problems, one of the things they're looking further into is the breathing, the connection to get you from, in essence, in this situation, from point A to point B.
I mean, if you think of digestion, that is your parasympathetic state or your rest, digest, repair state. So if you are anxious about something, you've got a deadline, you're trying to get work done, and you're trying to eat at the same time, you can't digest your food. It's almost impossible. And I've had patients where I've just told them, okay, before you eat, I want you to first smell your food. Think about food, smell it. You start to salivate. That's your first stage of digestion. And then take 3 deep breaths before you eat and think about how good that food's going to be. Just doing that gets your body in a state to receive the food and start to digest it. And just by doing that, his irritable bowel went away. It's very simple, but those are little things that we can do, that anybody can do to just increase their digestion to start off. Stop, think about your food, take 3 deep breaths, and just give yourself 5 minutes to start eating before you scroll through Instagram or look at your phone or continue with your work. Just let yourself give 5 minutes to think about eating, and eat. And then if you have to get doing on something, then you can go.
When you go on the road, or even if wherever one is living, just the thought of, oh, I'm going to have that slice of pizza, or I'm going to have that soup, or whatever it is, and you get all excited about it, and it's like it makes it that much better.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about it right now. I'm getting salivation going. I'm getting hungry.
When it comes to food, what are like, let's say, the three foods that you like having the most?
Oh, I'm a big fan of dark chocolate. I do enjoy that quite a bit. Favorite meal. I try to stay more gluten-free, but you mentioned pizza, so that's in my mind right now. So really good pizza is really good to have. And let's see, another one. I do love ice cream too. So I'm more of a sweet tooth, I'd have to say. I stayed off sugar for a year, and I would think like after a year of not having sugar, you would lose all your cravings. Yeah, not so much. But now I crave like really good desserts. I remember having a Reese's peanut butter cup, and the memory of that was like, oh, I can't wait to eat this. And how disappointed I was because I was so used to eating real food that when I went back to the artificial stuff, it just didn't do the same thing that it used to.
I'm with you on dark chocolate. Like, the more bitter, the better. Sign me up for that. You mentioned that you try to stay gluten-free. What was the initial impetus for you to decide, I want to go do that?
The manual therapy work I did after graduating from PT school. You asked about injuries. I had 3 concussions in high school, and my brain just wasn't really back on track. I mean, it slowly got there, but it kept me out of sports for a little bit, and cranial sacral therapy is the thing that got me back to competing again. After the neurologist said, you're done with sports the rest of your life. Like, baseball season's coming up. I can't do that. So I knew there was more to it. So I started going into really learning the different manual therapy works, cranial sacral, things like that. And so the group that I was with, they were into finding the things that you have addictions to and taking that away. So first thing that I went off was sugar. That was the big one for me. I was pretty much addicted to eating sugar. I was someone who put sugar on my cereal in the morning growing up, and Captain Crunch after a meal in college because it's right there. And so going off of sugar was really transformed my body. I wasn't really overweight, but I lost a lot of weight. It's like the sugar was coming out of my muscles, my bones. Like I just really went down to nothing. And then after, I think it was about 5 months, then my body just started to rebuild. Like muscles started coming back, but in a healthy way. It's like the sugar just was infused in those tissues and came out and then was able to rebuild. So then after that, it was like, let's try gluten. Let's see what that does. And so just eliminating that for a while. I personally didn't know it was a huge change because I don't think it was a super big issue for me. Now it's more about if I'm eating gluten, I want to eat good gluten, gluten that is not genetically modified to have more gluten inside of it, heirloom wheat. The flour hasn't been sitting on the shelf for months. It's freshly ground. So all those have to do with helping your digestion and enzymes and all of those things. And then ironically, one of the things I had to go off of, which was unique for me, was sports. I'd come home from work and I'd throw ESPN on and I'd watch that for at least 1 hour. And then if my team won, I'd just keep going on in the background and start enjoying it that way. So what happens is you have these little addictions, your limbic system, your survival mode kind of attaches to those. So as you take away something that you habitually do, your nervous system starts to relax a little bit more, and you get away from the instinctual thing like just turning that TV on every day when you get home to now having a choice. Do I want to look at the scores or do I not want to?
I call that discipline, where I'll say to myself, I'm not going to do this. And it's the whole key of just saying, I'm not going to do it. It may only be for a day, might be 2 days, but it's just something where I say, I'm not going to do it. Here's why. I need to get away from it. And sometimes I won't tape a podcast for like 3 weeks. I'm like, I got to get away from the computer. I got to get away from editing, because you get so involved in it and it stops becoming fun. Whatever we're talking about, whether it's my podcast, you watching sports, and you want things to be fun, you want things to be enjoyable, and they stop getting to be fun. You got to walk away from it, at least for a little bit.
Absolutely. And for me, it's when I find myself doing things without thinking. If I have, say, ice cream for like, 2 weeks in a row each night, I'll find myself that third week just going without even thinking about, do I want this or not? And it's like, okay, I need to stop this until I don't have that instinctual, like, I need the ice cream, right? It's one of those things. And sometimes it's like a week off, maybe it's 3 months, but at least 2 months of just really stopping something like that. And then you have the choice, okay, what do I want to do with this?
You mentioned a couple minutes ago that you had several concussions in high school.
Mhm.
How were you able, I guess, to overcome the fear of having another one? Because usually, especially now with what we know about concussions compared to a generation ago, what was the adjustment, I guess, that you had to make to convince yourself that you could go back out on the athletic field?
Great question. For me, honestly, doing the cranial sacral work got me to a place where I didn't feel as vulnerable. I was at a place where if someone just kind of like tapped my head, I would feel like the bell was being rung. And I didn't feel safe going back to anything until that was better. And the cranial sacral work got me back to a place where I felt more stable. And so baseball, I'm pretty good reflexively. So I wasn't too afraid of getting hit in the head with a pitch. Pitching wise, I was usually pretty good at getting my glove up right after I threw the ball. And that was always something I prided myself on. So I didn't feel too concerned that way. But then really getting this deeper work with the cranial sacral, I felt like plugs were taken out and all the pressure was drained out of my head to the point where I remember I was playing racquetball and I went head first. I was running forward to get the ball and I reached forward and I stepped on the racket. And then I couldn't get my hand out to brace myself against the front wall. And I went head first into the wall. And the first thing I realized was like, wow, if this had happened before I had all that work done on my head, I would have been out for the count. I mean, I feel like I would have been just really almost incapacitated. But because it had all the work done, it felt like a solid hit again and did a little work to decompress things, but I felt okay. So I think really doing the manual work almost takes away all the compressive forces that happen with concussions, right? You have 3 layers of tissue around your brain. And every time you get your bell rung, those tissues compress a little bit, almost saying like, hey, we're going to hold you a little tighter, which is great because it helps protect you, but you also have a lot less ability to compensate anymore. And so for me, it was the cranial sacral work. It decompressed those tissues, released them so that my brain would have more room to function. And your body is able to adapt to situations a little bit better versus getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Then you get a hit, there's nowhere else to go. And so it's just going to compound and compound each time you get a head injury.
I'm curious to get your take on this with CTE in sports right now, particularly in football and hockey. Because CTE seems to be this all-encompassing thing. Do you think CTE, I would almost call it something that people can just say this is the issue rather than maybe looking at other things, whether it's being a predisposition, a genetic component?
You bring up a very interesting question. I don't have the studies to be able to speak very intelligently about that. I know, like I said, from my personal experience and working with other people with head injuries, as you decrease that pressure and increase the blood flow to the brain, I think there is healing that takes place. But we don't know. We can't take a slice of the brain, do the work, take another slice of the brain and say, hey, did we increase the blood flow inside the brain like we would hope it is? I do think that these concussions absolutely affect behavior. And is there another emotional component that is associated with it? I would say there almost would have to be. So is it always just one thing? Probably not. Life is multidimensional. So I think you've got an interesting point of looking at what else is there psychologically, emotionally, mentally, when your life has been football or hockey and that ends. That in itself is a really challenging thing to overcome. And then you add how your brain has changed through all the different hits and injuries and repetitive traumas. Your ability to compensate and change to your new circumstances is really diminished. So I think you'd have to do a lot more work with that emotional and mental aspect of it when you have multiple head injuries. And then even that, I think you're limited with how much you can do when your brain is affected as much as it is.
You brought up an interesting point there about almost the transition from being an athlete to being, for lack of a better phrase, a regular person. How hard was that transition for you?
For me, it was pretty easy, I have to say. I knew I wasn't going to make my living in baseball. My senior year in college, I had an opportunity to go to Tucson, Arizona to work at a rehab facility. And it was really one of the best in the country. And I was like, wow, that's a great opportunity. But it was going to be during spring training. And at that point, I'm like, where's my livelihood going to bring me? Further in baseball, or is this really my calling? And I'm one of the lucky ones that I knew in high school that I wanted to do physical therapy. I remember being in the training room with a sprained ankle and watching one of my friends who was recovering from ACL injury take his first steps again. And the elation on his face when he stood up and took that step. And I was like, that's what I want to do for people. So that has always been my drive. Going to college, I wanted to go to a place I could play baseball and go to physical therapy school. But physical therapy, I knew that was more of my calling than baseball was. So transitioning, it was a loss because of that camaraderie and the relationship you form with your teams. I almost think it was a harder transition leaving college, where I had all your friends, and then I worked and lived by myself in New Jersey for 5 years. And that, I think, going from that community to then being by myself was a harder transition. I think the transition for me was hard because I was always on the go. Playing baseball, physical therapy school was very challenging, and time was a very valuable resource. You didn't have a lot of extra time. To then being on your own, not having the social life. And it's almost like all of the things I was sort of running from throughout my life just came crashing down on me. That's when I dealt with the child abuse from my childhood. That's when all of those things just came forward. And that's when I had to deal with it because I wasn't busying myself. It was also a huge transformational time. And I think without that, I wouldn't be where I am today. But it made me kind of hit your midlife crisis a lot earlier in life. And I feel like we all go through that midlife crisis at some point, whether you're transitioning from a professional sport to your other life, or you're in a profession for a long time and you're miserable and you're saying, wait, I've spent how many years doing something I'm not happy with, and for what? So I think these are things that the more we ask ourselves these questions on a more regular basis, the more we can avoid that crisis of, oh man, I got to quit my job. I got to buy that new sports car or do something crazy, and really keep asking us those questions like, are we really doing what fulfills us? What brings us that joy? Are we living the life we really want to live? Or are we doing something because we're supposed to?
One of the things that I found for me with going from high school to college was I had all this extra time. When someone, I don't care who it is, you all of a sudden have all this extra time, and this could be going from what you did in college to now all of a sudden you have the extra time. Or for me, when I went from high school, I was working and taking a ton of classes to go into college my freshman year. I'm like, oh, I have all this free time. And that's when the problems start, because you're like, how do I fill the time?
Yep, you're right. I mean, any transition that way, you have to really evaluate. And that's where addictions come in, right? Because you go right to the next addiction to fill that space.
Yeah, I'd like to throw away my first semester grade point average in college if I could.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
So taking a bit of a step back here, growing up, how did your interest in the various sports that you participated all kind of come to be?
One thing my parents were amazing at was really exposing us to all different sports and activities. My mother was a gymnastics teacher, so from the time I was 3 through the end of high school, we had gymnastics once a week. I think that's where the diving came in for me. Unfortunately, I was not very good at basketball because I put most of my time in football and baseball. And so I'm like, well, I'm not going to make the basketball team, so what can I do? So I ended up doing diving. We were exposed to soccer and volleyball, all the different things growing up. My dad was a professional baseball player, so that was where I think the baseball interests came in. My mom was also into acting and things like that, so we all did plays growing up. I think that's where my brother kind of got into the acting bug and like just loved doing that. So my sister, my brother, and I were all involved in theater and sports and music and things like that. So I think our parents just did an amazing job of exposing us to the different things and just supporting where our desires went to.
Did you and your brother ever act in anything together or ever play on the same sports team? Because I know you're a couple of years younger, but you're close enough that it could have happened.
Sport wise, not so much because he was 2 years older. It's always like every league, it's 2 years as you go to the next one. But we were in, let's see, one, two, like, we did the Fantastics, Anything Goes, Wizard of Oz. We definitely did a few plays together. He was always the lead. I was more of the supporting cast. And my sister too, she was involved in those plays with us. So it was a fun kind of family thing. During Anything Goes, we all learned how to tap dance. The teacher even like had a tap dancing for Klutz's class. So my dad went in and my mom loved it because she did that growing up. So all of us got to learn how to tap dance.
Between you, your brother, and your sister, who's the best tap dancer?
I was probably the best tap dancer. I think I'm probably the most coordinated of the three of us, which bode well. Like my brother had his acting. That was his thing. Sports was more my thing. My sister, she's amazing at doing sales. She works in trade shows and excels in that. So all of us kind of had our own path. So I never felt like we were really competing in the same thing.
Even though all three of you as siblings had your own path, was there a level of competitiveness that all trying to sort of one-up each other, as a lot of siblings tend to do growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to be doing what my brother did. I pretty much idolized him growing up and followed him. I think his favorite game growing up was like Blues Jared. He'd be with his friends and I'd be trying to chase them and hey guys, wait up, wait for me. And I think that's probably why I did better in sports, because I was always competing with him and his friends. So I was always playing with people 2 years older than I was. So I had to be better. And so I always had that competitive spirit. Yet I remember playing tennis with him. I always wanted to beat him. But yet when he got really frustrated, I would always feel a little badly. So it was one of those, we were very competitive, but yet I also didn't want him to be upset.
For you, because you were in college when your brother started getting fame with Dawson's Creek and then Varsity Blues. Did you ever get annoyed with people asking you about him rather than about you?
Yeah, it's one of those things you learn pretty quickly what people's interests are and why they're talking to you. So I'm pretty good at picking that up sooner than later. I think one of the more frustrating times I remember going to the mound to pitch in college, and the other team would start singing the theme song to Dawson's Creek. That was like, oh, geez, come on, give me a break here. And you're do-do-do-do-do. I'm like, oh, man, can I just play ball here?
That's called how to live rent-free in your head.
Oh, man, yeah, exactly. It definitely gave me a little more motivation to get them out, that's for sure. And I think one of the strangest times was going to the dining hall, and there's a rack of all these different magazines. And at one point, his face was on the cover of every magazine that was on that wall. Hey, bro. But yeah, it was fun at the same time. I mean, I was super proud of him and very happy for him to get that opportunity. And I knew he was doing what he loved. So one aspect, I really was super happy for him. It wasn't too hard on me. I mean, there are certain times it's like, okay, I could do without this, especially when he turned 21 and I could get his ID. And I just couldn't use that in places because like, you're not him. Like, man, come on. But he's always been super generous and bringing me down to set and helping us out, helping pay for college and things like that. So we definitely had our bonuses and perks with his fame, and the benefits very much outweighed the struggles.
I'm curious here, out of all the times that you had to get a touch of hobnobbing with all the celebrities, who's the one person that you had a conversation with that in the moment you said, I can't believe I'm talking to this person?
There was one time when I went down for my brother's 30th birthday party, and he's like, hey, I'm having a party, come on down. So I walked into the house, and they're out on the back deck, and Gwyneth Paltrow came out and started talking to me. And it was just one of those things, I had no idea she was going to be there. And I'm like, oh, okay. Hey, how are you? And we just had a very good conversation. And the funny part was my brother watched the whole thing. And he said, I loved it. He's like, I see you walk in, you kind of get this surprised look on your face, but then very calmly, coolly, just try to take a deep breath and talk to her. And the biggest thing you realize, like, they are all human beings. And it doesn't matter how big or famous you get, we're all human and we all connect on a human level. And so I've always found just the biggest thing is just talk, listen, respond as you would anybody else. I think that's always gotten me further and helped me to not get starstruck when talking. I mean, there's always that sense of like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. But then as soon as you get into that conversation, like, okay, hey, this is a normal person and this is just a normal conversation.
And if you can find something in common with whoever that celebrity is, whether we're talking athletics or entertainment, it kind of breaks down that wall and they kind of trust you a little bit more. And it just becomes an everyday conversation. It's just two people, may not be at a bar, but in essence, just sitting at a bar, just having a chat.
Exactly. And you brought up a great point. It's like you find the things that you have in common, and that goes for any relationship or any new person you meet. You find that one thing you can connect over, and that's a great way to go.
Away from athletics, acting, all that kind of stuff, what's a favorite story you have with your family growing up?
I think one of our favorite experiences, we did this one trip to Barbados as a family. We did more like car trips, 3-hour trips here and there. But this is the first time we flew somewhere, and it was a Caribbean island. We'd never seen that before. And warm water, and there was this storm out in the ocean. And so we had these big waves coming over. And we all just had a blast. I mean, we were there for hours just riding the waves, enjoying the warm weather, the warm water. It was an all-inclusive. We got a great deal because we realized that place was closing the week after we left. So it was just this incredible experience where we're eating food. We can have more than one Coke at dinner. And so, can I have one more ice cream? Like, yes, it's all the same. We just still talk about like that experience and how amazing it was to go to some place like the Caribbean islands and be in warm water and ride the waves and experience a life of luxury for a week. That was an amazing experience for us.
I'm a huge beach guy. I'm actually heading to San Diego in the not too distant future. And anytime I can get by decent water, I don't know how warm it'll be in San Diego, but anytime I can get by a beach and water and good food, I'm a happy person.
Absolutely.
I know you grew up in Connecticut, so do you miss your proximity to be able to go to New York and Boston basically in a day trip?
No. We didn't do a ton of trips to either place. Going into the city was usually like a big event and a fun thing to do. But being out where I am in San Francisco, I mean, 3 hours I'm in Tahoe and skiing on great mountains there. We've got the water right here. We got the vineyards an hour up the road. It's a wonderful place to live. The people are really more open to alternative treatments. And so when I talked about acupuncture, I didn't look at like I was crazy. Really good fresh food, farmers markets out here all year long. So I really love this area. I do miss the four seasons. There's something about the smell of the fall when the leaves are falling and the foliage. I do miss that a lot. I do get to winter if I go up to Tahoe. But there's something about the four seasons that really divided the year up in a much more distinct way. So I do miss that. But as far as Boston or New York, not too much.
As someone who also lived in Connecticut and doesn't anymore, I don't miss the snow.
Yeah, I guess it's nice to be able to travel to it and then leave it when I want to.
I will second that. And I'm curious, since you live out in the Bay Area, do you ever go down to Mavericks to at least watch the surfers, if not partake yourself?
Definitely not partaking myself. I've surfed twice in my life. It's something I would love to get down to. I just have not really been aware of when it's happening to run down there, and I'm working during the week. I have patience. I don't like to just cancel patience like, hey, I have Mavericks today. Sorry, I'm going to run down there and do that. But it would be something really, I think, spectacular to see. But you also have to have the binoculars. I don't think it's like you see on TV where they get the close-ups. You are kind of far away, so I don't think you can really get the perspective you do on TV.
Going back to your athletic career here, what made you decide, I guess, in terms of college, that you were going to play baseball over diving and football?
Football, I think the head injuries you talked about, when did you feel safe going back to play? I think after 2 in football, the third concussion was diving, doing the flipping, and my head just kind of kept going. Too many head injuries, too many bell rings, and I think I was done with that. And not sure what level I would have been able to play football. Diving, I think the 3-meter springboard was a little too intimidating to me. I know how hard and how much it hurts when you slap on the water on a 1 meter. So going to 3 meter and doing that just didn't sound like a really good idea for me. I think it could have been fun, but my passion was more baseball. So going to college, I wanted to be able to play baseball, go to physical therapy school, and have a place that I could run around on big fields of green grass. And the University of Vermont matched all of those.
So what was baseball like in February in Vermont? I can't imagine it was too comfortable at times.
It's kind of funny. We always had our indoor facility, which is dirt on a big gymnasium. And then our first time fielding ground balls would be when we went down for spring training to Florida. And so we'd be playing teams that were 12-1, play the University of Miami. And we're trying to figure out how to get a ground ball without breaking our nose. Or wait, what does a ball bounce like on grass again? Fly ball? How does that look? So it was very challenging. And our first half of the season was always away. We'd travel down to Delaware and Townsend and Hartford just to get out of the snow. And then even the second half, when we were our first home games, I remember we were out shoveling the field because we had a snowstorm. So it was definitely challenging and very cold in the beginning parts of that season.
As a pitcher, how hard was it to stay loose? I know you're a relief pitcher, so oftentimes it's one inning, but if you're going from inning to inning in that cold, how do you stay loose?
Big warm jackets. You get accustomed to the weather. When I lived there, I was much better at being in cold weather than I am now after being in California. So you do kind of get used to that weather. And you just kind of keep walking around in the dugout between innings and not just sit down and stay static. Just keep the blood flowing. And then you go out there, you do a lot lighter throws, your first few warm-up throws, and then kind of crank it up as you get into the last part of your warm-up.
What intrigued you when you were a kid about pitching over, let's say, playing third base or the outfield or something like that?
I think I like having the ball in my hands, having control. It's up to you. And I kind of like that feeling. I love team sports because you're all working together, but everyone has their role. And when you're pitching, it's just that one-on-one, all right, you versus me. Let's see who's got the better stuff today. And I love that feeling, the challenge of each batter. My dad and I would watch baseball games, and my brother too. We'd say, okay, let's see where that pitch is going to be thrown. All right, what is he going to throw next? And what location? Oh, see, he did this on that pitch. So it was always like that mental part of the game. And I wasn't the best pitcher, but I think I had a good mental aspect of knowing how to pitch instead of just being a thrower. So I think that's how I was able to play in college. So I love the mental games you play with the batter. Throw inside, outside, high, couple pitches, then you throw the curveball, so fool them that way. So I think that strategy and competition, each batter was something I just really thrived on.
I would love to watch a baseball game with you because I love talking that strategy and things like that. I think that would be a lot of fun for me.
Baseball, people are like, it's so slow and boring. I'm like, yeah, but when you watch it, you're watching all these little tricks of the trade. It really can be fascinating.
I think one thing that TV doesn't always capture is the infielders playing behind the pitcher. So you might see a pitch, and if you're in attendance watching the game in person, you're like, well, why is that pitch there? If they're playing them to pull, why are they going outside when the guy just had an opposite field single at bat before? And there's all that kind of strategy involved that when you're at home on TV, you don't get to see that.
Yeah, it's very true. You get so used to watching it on TV that you kind of have to like relearn how to watch the game when you see the whole field. And it's like, well, I can't see where that pitcher exactly was. And like, wait, no. Now I can see, like you talked about, the infielders, the outfielders, where everyone's playing, how they're getting ready for each pitch. You almost have to adjust to train yourself back to like, okay, let's watch this in a different way where you're kind of seeing the whole field. Same thing watching a football game, right? You can see receivers, what the routes are going, how they're doing the different levels, and where the defensive back's going, and that's why they chose to throw to that person. Just a really different perspective.
I have friends who always get annoyed with me because I want to sit either behind home plate or if it's football in the end zone or hockey behind the goal, because you can see everything in one shot, which makes it a lot easier to analyze and digest everything. They're like, the view isn't as good. And I'm like, the view is perfect. You see everything in front of you.
Yeah, it's all about what you're looking for.
When you look back on your career, whether we're talking, let's say, little league, high school, college, what's a memory you think about that often brings a smile to your face?
I think the one thing that brings a smile to my face was playing football. I didn't get the starting job my senior year as a quarterback, so I was a receiver. And then going into the semifinal game, our quarterback was sick, and so I had to play quarterback. And we're playing like the #1 team in the state. And it's just one of those games, you kind of like don't even feel your feet on the ground. You play at a level you probably haven't played before, and we won the game. And it's just one of those feelings of, I knew I could do it, and I got the chance to do it in a really big game. And for me, it was almost like that self-gratification of like, okay, I knew I could do this. This was my chance to show it, and I came through for the team. And The whole team played a level up as well. It's kind of one of those things like your star gets hurt, everyone plays a little bit better. And my family got to come and watch me play. And it was just a really fun experience to come in a spot like that and come through and kind of end my career that way.
Well, if you're going to go out on top. That sounds like a pretty good way to end it.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of, let's say, a recruiting process on the baseball side, I know we've talked about the physical therapy side in addition to being able to play baseball in college, but were there any other considerations or were there any other schools involved outside of Vermont that you had an opportunity to perhaps play for in college?
I got into Quinnipiac College, which was basically about 5 minutes down the road from where I lived. So I think I wanted to be at least a area code. I need to have a different area code, so I had to be out of Connecticut. Ithaca was another college I looked at, but I don't think I got into Ithaca. Northeastern, I think I got into there. For me, I wanted to be far enough away that it was a completely new experience, but close enough where you can get back if you needed to.
Fun fact, right now, Northeastern's baseball coach is Tom Glavine's brother.
Oh, yeah? Well, fun fact for the Catamounts, University of Vermont, the soccer team just won the national championship. So that was pretty unexpected.
Did you watch a game?
No, I did not. I don't have cable here, so I wasn't able to catch it, but my brother-in-law kept me informed.
The SID, when I reached out to find out about some more stuff about the Catamounts of the late 90s, early 2000s, because as you know, Vermont dropped baseball for a while. And I mentioned that you had played there. He's like, what? You just blew my mind.
That's great.
In terms of sports, whether we're talking baseball, football, etc., who are some of the idols you had growing up?
Don Mattingly was the number one for me. I was a huge Yankees fan. He was left-handed. I was left-handed. He played first base. I played first base. Yeah, he was definitely my number one guy. I remember my brother got a chance to meet him. I was like, what? You're so lucky.
So do you think Mattingly should be in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, of course.
It's amazing to think how long he was in New York, and he's, I would say, probably the best known Yankee not to have a World Series ring.
I know. It was like a year after he left, they won. Oh, man, the poor guy. I was a big Yankees fan when the Yankees were terrible in the 80s. They were not that good. So that was hard. I was very disappointed. But I think every batting stance he had, I copied for a while. So
Do you still have the Kevin Moss and Cecilio Guante baseball cards?
I think my mom gave our collection away a long time ago.
It sounded like you were. Were you a card collector growing up? Was that something you got really involved in?
You look at people who are really involved with it, nothing to that level, but I definitely love collecting them and the stale bubble gum that you got that was hard as a rock when you got it. So that was a fun part of getting them.
A couple of years ago, I bought like an old 81 Topps pack just for the heck of it. It was one pack and the gum was still in there. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to have that.
I mean, you got to just try to chew it, just for old time's sake, just for the old memories of the flavor of that gum. It lost flavor with about 3 bites, but it was good.
There's just something about it. I don't know what it was, but you almost were more excited about the gum unless you got a favorite player.
Right? Yeah, it's like, no, nobody on my team, but I got the gum.
I know you have to go in a couple of minutes. We talked a little bit about your practice, but not a lot. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, my practice is out of Mill Valley, just north of San Francisco, and really combining the physical therapy, the acupuncture, and the heart math to really get down to the root cause of people's pain. And I think a lot of times we chase pain around or try to mask the symptoms. And one thing I really focus on is let's get down to the root cause, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. And once you do that, the healing process goes a lot faster. And always remembering our body has that ability to heal. We just need to get it the right environment for it to do that. And then I also have a program called the Pathway to Healing. That's a 6-week program that helps you identify and heal the mental, the emotional, physical, and spiritual blockages that keep you from healing. And so that's something that I started last year, and it's been a lot of fun walking people through that process.
So with that 6-week course, is that something that people can find online or is that an in-person
Yeah,
session?
it's online. We have daily videos, 5-minute videos that kind of give you something to think about and work through each day. And then there's a live coaching on Zoom once a week. So that's something people can look at on the website, www.pathway2healing.com, where it has my practice. And then there's one on for the program itself.
I know you mentioned Instagram, but can people find you on YouTube, TikTok, and stuff like that as well?
To be honest, I haven't been into that much. I think Instagram is the one that I post and then comes up on Facebook as well. So at Jared Van Der Beek. So pretty easy to find that one.
So let's say 10 years down the road, mid-50s, where do you see yourself?
Where do I see myself? I see myself really doing a little bit more lecturing, really having a bigger impact on helping people really understand where these root causes of pain come from and to be able to heal them. It's really one of my passions in life. It's what drives me to keep studying and keep learning and putting things out there because I know what a difference it made in my life. And I want to help people do that same thing. So just if there are different ways for me to do that and finding the way that works best, whether it's accessible and people can do it, nothing makes me smile bigger than when people get that aha or be like, oh my gosh, I've had this for so long and now that pain's gone, or I've had this anxiety for so long and then you help me understand the root cause of it, shift my mindset on it and the emotional aspect attached to it. And I don't have that anymore. It lights me up. I feel like that's what I'm here to do is really help people walk through that process. So that's kind of what I see myself doing.
Jared, I want to thank you so much for joining the I Play 2 podcast today and coming on and talking about your family, your athletic career, pathway to healing. And I wish you continued success with your business. And thank you for all that you do in trying to help people solve their pain and anxiety. And take care, man. Thank you for joining the show.
Thank you, Rob. I really enjoyed this time with you. You do a great job, made me feel really comfortable, and keep doing what you're doing. I think this is a great idea.